We do have 5 minutes for questions. Same as last time, please state your name and your the company you're representing.
Tim O'Grady from Origin Energy. I've got a question for Jennifer. If there is another challenge, or if there is another vote on Tony Abbott's leadership, could you set out how you see that may happen in terms of a trigger and a process, given that the last vote, of course, was bizarre and that didn't have a declared candidate against him?
Well, they didn't have a declared candidate against him, but it was very obvious that it was Malcolm Turnbull. But it still was messy. I think everyone, including the people who voted for Abbott, everyone's kind of accepted, that this is a two-stage process and that things have got to really turn around in the next few months, and that the budget will be a key part of that. So I would say, despite all the uncertainty around this, that if in fact polls haven't improved, if in fact there's still complaints about Tony Abbott, which I think there will be, and hockey together. He will not, for example, move against hockey. That's extremely clear. Nor will he fire Peter Credlin. That sometime after the budget, Abbott, I still don't think, might be wrong, but I still don't think he'll stand aside. So I think there'll be a vote, and at this stage, Malcolm would declare, and it would then be, I think, almost impossible for Abbott to survive that. The question is how vicious it became, but everyone would know that it would be in their interests not to be. But I must say, having spent a few days in Canberra this week, I was really kind of quite struck about how, keen they all are to, it's like kind of being in a psych ward. I mean, they're all just completely beside themselves. So I'm not quite sure whether or not they can actually contain themselves, but that would be the desire to make it look not like the Labor rabble, but, something slightly more dignified.
David Fabian from Lander and Rogers Lawyers. In the last session, all the experts seemed to agree that the order of things should be that we get our house in order, get our budget under control, stop all this crazy spending, and then you can get on with a good economy. But instinctively, listening to what you guys are saying, it seems like real politics suggests the converse, that you loosen the purse strings a little bit, stimulate the economy, spend a bit of money, generate employment, everybody will relax, and then you'll be able to take control of the situation at the budget level. And I think it's fair to say that the Australian economy is in relatively good shape when you compare it with other economies, and that maybe that's not such a difficult thing to achieve safely. Is that realpolitik, or is that naive dreaming?
Well, I don't think it's naive dreaming, but I think one of the reasons that Jane Halton's looking quite serious is trying to, put all that together. I mean, as Warren said, the political and economic trajectory at the moment are on different paths, and that's why I think it's very hard for Abbott and hockey to make it add up. You actually need a new political dynamic and an explanation to try and make that work. In terms of what you do, yes, that's true that, in some ways, a little bit of more government spending would be helpful. On the other hand, as Jane pointed out, that recurrent spending, which is, so heavy on health and welfare over the medium term. I mean, you can, and that's what I think. That's the trick that they were trying to do, but they did not pull off politically because of some of the silly decisions they made. Which is to say, this is not a panic thing, but we really do need to address this in a sensible way. And in the meantime, we will, provide more money for, childcare. And we will, try and protect, the family package or things like that. But there are some things we need to do, and also then to also have I still think it's very important with people needing reassurance, and I know rhetoric can only go so far, that is true, but I think nobody really has much of a clue what either party stands for at the moment, and that, you know, and Tony, we know, and Tony can attack very well the Labor Party on that, but his constant repetition of, you know, we've abolished the carbon tax and we've abolished the mining tax is, you know, is true. But it's not enough for people who kind of also want a bit more, are looking for a bit more reassurance and hope about where the future is. And that's where the promises on infrastructure are supposed to, you know, do help. But you know, that kind of contradiction now about, you know, sorry, that's suddenly off the table in Queensland, and it's going to be extremely difficult in Victoria with the new Andrews government, which I think is much more beholden to the CMFEU than they like to admit. So, no, it's not naive, and it is possible, but it's nuanced and it's difficult, and I don't think it's only become more difficult over the last year because of the missteps.
I've got a quick question for you, Sean, and then we might wrap up. You talked about the $20 billion privatisation plan outlined by the Baird government and the infrastructure development opportunities. I'm a frequent user of Sydney Airport, a world-class piece of infrastructure, but it is a premium price product, and it does have challenges around traffic congestion during peak periods. Is that an example of why the New South Wales electorate may have reservations about privatisation, or do you think it's deeper than that?
Look, I think it's part of it, but I think it is deeper than that. In the first instance, I think it's a lot harder to have a personal relationship with an airport potentially for the majority of the population than it is to have with their, you know, electricity supply, which is essential to them living their lives. So I think that's one thing. But I think you make a very interesting point about essentially getting fleeced under a privatised asset. That's precisely, I think, what's playing strongly out there in voter land. It's precisely the point that the ALP is going hardest on. And it's a very, the benefit for Labor in putting that debate forward is that it's an extremely difficult argument to counter. It's a complicated argument. The national electricity network, as most of you would know, is an incredibly complex beast with several levels of regulation. So there's no simple rebuttal to the proposition that if you sell our assets, your power bill is going to go through the roof. So that's a big challenge for Mike Baird and his government to how do you actually get that across to the electorate in the hurly-burly of an election campaign?
That's a good
And
point.
in fact, in Victoria, you know, the Victoria proves the case that privatisation is actually good for consumers. However, it's always hard, I guess, for a New South Wales Premier to point that out.
Articulate that, yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are out of time. I don't want to keep the Premier waiting. We are going to have lunch with him very shortly. That was a fantastic session. It was a fantastic morning as well. Please join me in thanking Jennifer and Sean.